Thank you so much for the intro, Brendan. We're very excited to be here. As he was saying, my name's Peter and this is Bex, and we're the co-founders of Anteater. We sell edible bugs to chefs and restaurants around New Zealand. Ultimately, we want to replace conventional protein with bugs. We've got dishes all around, in restaurants all around New Zealand, including 3 of the top 7 restaurants in New Zealand, as well as special events like Te Papa's Bug Lab exhibition and TEDx Christchurch.
Now, I wouldn't normally start like this, but on this occasion, with this audience, I think it's only right that I open our speech with just a little bit of a confession on my part. I'm supposed to be sitting where you're sitting. Last year, I undertook a graduate diploma in innovation and entrepreneurship through our School of Business. And I should be technically graduating today, except that instead of doing my industry internship project last semester like I was supposed to, I launched a bug business. Thanks, guys. And now, 6 months later, somehow, instead of graduating with all of you, Ara has asked me to come back here with Peter and tell you all about our journey.
Bex is the keynote speaker at her own graduation. How awesome is that?
Now, look, I think it's only right for us just to quickly give you guys a bit of a context around what we're doing, because I'm sure that there are more than a few skeptics in the audience who possibly, at this point, think that maybe we sound a little bit like crazy people. But it might interest you to know that 80% of the world's cultures, that's 2 billion people worldwide, already eat insects as a core part of their daily diet. And of the 2,000 edible species, many of the ones that we've tried are genuinely delicious, with flavors ranging from coriander to mushrooms, coffee, blue cheese, TNT lollies, you name it.
It'll interest you to know that bugs are incredibly healthy as well. Gram for gram, there are bugs with more protein than steak, more calcium than milk, and more iron than spinach. But beyond that, we want to explain why we actually started in the first place. 3 of the biggest problems on the planet right now are climate change, freshwater use, and land use. Agriculture is the #1 contributor to all 3 of those problems. And it's set to get worse. The population is meant to reach 10 billion people by 2050, and the UN thinks protein production is actually going to need to double in order to feed everyone. But recently, they published a report, 200-page report, on how and why edible insects might solve these problems. We found some really exciting stats in this report. Insects require 10 times less feed than beef to produce the same amount of food. They require 1,500 times less water and emit 100 times fewer greenhouse gases. To put all of that in perspective, if you swap out a beef-based meal a week for an insect-based meal, over a year you're freeing up 150 square meters of land. That's almost the size of this stage that we're standing on.
And so, armed with some of that contextual information, I mean, we would hope at this stage that some of the skeptics amongst you might start to maybe change your minds a little bit about bugs. And that's amazing. But we know that today is not about sustainability. Today is about possibility.
Today's all about where you guys go next. So it's less important for us to tell you the why part of our business, and more important to tell you how we got here and some important lessons that we've learned along the way.
Our parents' generation told us a story. It was their story, their parents' story. You go to school, you work hard, you grow up, you get a degree, you immediately land a relevant job, you get a mortgage, you work your way up to the top of your field, and then eventually, one day, you retire. That story was told to all of us like a promise. And I believed it. So I spent years working for other people, trying to force my way down that path, until finally I realized that that path just doesn't exist for most of us anymore. I realized that our parents' generation are still inhabiting the jobs that I want, and that mortgages are completely unaffordable for most millennials, and that retirement is a concept I genuinely cannot conceive of let alone save up enough money to actually afford. So I went to business school so that I could try and find my own path and start writing my own story.
I grew up wanting to be a billionaire. I was going to be an entrepreneur and retire by the time I was 36. I left university super confident this was somehow just going to happen. I knew I was going to be a success. I was just waiting for that moment, that big break that would lead me to that success. It never arrived. And one day I realized it was because all of my goals had been results-based goals rather than action-based goals. The goal was to win, not to put practice in. So I started making more action-based goals. I went to my boss and said, "Hey boss, I want to be an entrepreneur. How can I add value to your business while furthering my own ambitions?" He said, "Peter, I want you to start thinking of this business as if it's your own and just use me as the sounding board." So I started doing a lot of the invoicing, the customer service, a lot of stuff that would be boring to most people. But it was exciting to me because it was taking me closer to that step of being an entrepreneur. This action-based philosophy transferred into other areas of my life as well. I've always wanted to be a better public speaker, so I made a goal to go to Toastmasters every week. I realized accolades don't make you better at anything. Practice does. So the goal was no longer to win that annual competition they had. The goal was to attend every week and practice with tenacity. Because of all this, 2 years later, when the idea of bugs came along, I felt prepared to give it a crack.
I have learned a great many things working on Anteater with Peter. But probably the most important lesson that he's taught me is that anything is possible. Peter and I met completely by random chance at a young entrepreneurs event called Startup Weekend last May. Peter got up in front of a room full of people, strangers, and confidently said that he wanted to start looking at the idea of bugs as food. He wanted to form the Tesla of agriculture right here in New Zealand. And I thought he was sweet and ridiculous. But the thing is that Peter is a believer. We have this wall of fame at our awesome shared office space. It's sort of a place for people to brag about their achievements. And over time, this wall has slowly just turned into pictures of Peter with trophies. When I told him I was going to include this, he let me know that there are a couple of trophy photos outstanding here, so I'm sorry if there are a few that we haven't included today, Peter. And look, we all make fun of him about it all the time. But I realized something, and it's that it's not that he is just inherently this overachiever. It's not that things just come more easily to him. It's that he's truly open to trying anything. And he genuinely believes that all of his dreams, no matter how big and how ridiculous, are possible. And I'll tell you what, that belief is contagious. So when he tells me that we're going to change the face of agriculture, when he says we're going to save the world one bug at a time, when he says he wants to make beef and lamb redundant, he makes me believe that that's possible.
Bex is the most resilient person I know. How many of you could put tarantulas and scorpions on your back and still be smiling? Seriously, about a month ago, we had the toughest week of our lives. And it was the biggest festival that Anteater had done yet. 4 days, outside Auckland, 15,000 people, middle of a field. What could go wrong? Well, 2 days before the event, Bex tears her ACL. We talk about our options, and we both quickly realize she has to be there at the event. She's the one with all the event experience, she's the one who devised the entire menu, and she was the one overseeing the staff. So with a crutch and a knee brace, she got Jetstar to wheel her onto a plane, which was an achievement because it was Jetstar. I've always wanted to get that in there somewhere. The minute Bex landed, things only got worse. A cyclone hits the North Island and it rains for 5 days straight. Everything we own gets drenched or destroyed. Our tents leak so that we're sleeping in puddles, and we lose 2 mobile phones. 2 fatalities of the technological kind. Bex could barely walk that entire time, but she was still up and around cooking for 14 hours each day in mud about a foot deep. There's no complaining, no blame shifting, simply her mentality of, okay, this thing's gone wrong, what's my next best step? It wasn't until the last day that I actually realized how much pain Bex had been in. While I was away packing up the car, one of the other food vendors comes over to her and tells her how inspiring and brave she had been for getting through that entire weekend. For the first time since I'd known Bex, she actually starts crying a little bit. Yet as I'm coming back from the car, she's pushing on. I catch her packing up that marquee all by herself.
Well, I mean, it's not going to pack up itself, is it? You know. I often say that I have learned more in this last year of running this business than I have in the previous 10 years combined. And I think that Peter and I would probably both agree that running Anteater has been the most rewarding and the most terrifying experience of our lives. But we've really learned the distinction between working a job and making a difference. And that the world is full of possibility if you can just be brave enough to take a chance on yourself.
These days, the trophy I'm most proud of is the one Bex and I won together for Anteater. But there are 100 other trophies we didn't win, and that's perfectly okay. Because the goal is to get better. The goal is to learn and to not worry what anyone else thinks of your crazy ambitions.
If I were to guess, I would assume that most of the people in this room right now are feeling some combination of reflection and excitement, pride, and a bit of fear. And if we can leave you with anything today, I think it's just to tell you that we feel exactly the same. So do reflect on everything that's brought you here. Be so proud of everything that you have learned and achieved this far. Stay excited about the road ahead, and don't be afraid to be afraid. Because that's how you know you're doing something really important. Congratulations to all of you.
And best of luck with the road ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.